Look, my view on that is that Microsoft are having to shove Copilot in people's faces because they're not getting the market share that they anticipated. And I did a poll recently on LinkedIn that had 150 people respond. You might even been one of them. And ChatGPT was the tool of preference for over 60% of the respondents. And in terms of the Copilot stats, the Copilot was only the preference for 17% of respondents. Now, bear in mind, before I launched the AI services company, I've been a Microsoft 365 solutions architect for the past 7 years. So I've got a lot of Microsoft 365 people in my network. I was shocked, like genuinely shocked.
Hi, Matt. Thank you very much for being on today's episode. Just to get things kicked off, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi, James. Thank you very much for inviting me along. Really pleased to be here. I've been working in IT since I was 15 years old, so 20 odd years now, and I've been working in the AI space for the last couple of years of that. Recently launched my AI consulting company, Artificial. We've got our official brand go live on the 2nd of July, so really excited by that. We do anything from AI adoption through to agent builds, compliance, all of that good stuff, and looking forward to sharing all of our learnings that we've had along the way so far with you here today.
Now, today's episode I think is going to be really interesting. We had started to unpack this a little bit offline, but started talking about shadow IT examples, didn't we, in terms of users using their company domains to register for subscriptions, etc. But we're now starting to get into that era of shadow AI, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're not going to focus on, I guess, the possibilities, the capabilities of AI, because I think, that's ever evolving, but really how are people using it today and what is happening with that shadow AI space? So come on, let's unpack that. What have you seen out there in the wild?
Oh man, what a lot to unpack. It's a huge and ever evolving topic, James. It's absolutely massive. I was chatting with a gentleman yesterday. They run a 50 user business and they have a massive concern over shadow AI. He put out a poll using Google Forms and just polled the user base really quickly. And they found that 65% of people are using a ChatGPT free subscription. 65%, right? It's huge. Okay. And to put that into context, they're using Google Workspace. They get Gemini Pro for free included. So what we're seeing is that people still have a really strong preference toward ChatGPT. And it's absolutely no wonder. I did a couple of rounds of presentations for Lenovo this week, and I opened the presentation with, if I say AI, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? And in the sessions, immediately, both times, people went, oh, ChatGPT. And it's like, yeah, but that's just a tiny part of the market. ChatGPT is to AI what Hoover is to the vacuum cleaner, right? You don't have a vacuum cleaner, you have a Hoover, but that's a brand. And it's because of that, ChatGPT's pull is absolutely huge. It's like got its own gravity around it and people just flock toward it. So it's really difficult for administrators to lure users away from ChatGPT. So in my mind, what we need to be doing is actually enabling people to use the tools that they want to use safely, rather than going, you mustn't use that and we're going to restrict it.
Yeah, because I'd imagine as part of that polling, even in a relatively small organization like that, there are going to be a number of users there that are using it to help them at work, because that's all they're hearing everywhere. AI will help you do things faster, quicker, start to reduce some of those work-based pressures. Like, did you get that from the polling in terms of they were sharing examples as to how they're using it for work? Because that must have been a shock to that business owner.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a shock, really. I think the expectation was that they were going to be using Gemini a lot more because that's the tool that's included with Google Workspace. We didn't really get into any specific metrics or anything in terms of like use cases with ChatGPT, but generally speaking, most people are using it for work, right? And even if it's like writing emails or summarizing meetings or expanding on notes, the problem that you've got is if that you're using it for work, innocently, you're going to start leaking proprietary information. And any business who thinks, oh, well, for example, let me take a value-added reseller or an e-com store. I'm just a box shifter. I've not got any IP. That's not true. You've got your marketing, you've got your processes, you've got your systems. All of those things that are integral to how your business runs are really, really important. Every business has IP of some kind, and people are just kind of, I don't know, business owners and administrators are kind of going, no, I'm not going to look at that problem. It's a big, ugly problem to solve, and I don't want to think about it right now. I'm just going to trust that people aren't putting bad data or things that they shouldn't put into ChatGPT on free editions.
So, I mean, how would you go about on that enablement piece? Because I love the example you've given with Gemini and this customer. I'm going to call out Microsoft and Copilot on this. Okay? I'm exactly the same, right? I know ChatGPT. I do use ChatGPT to help me out with some of my personal tasks. But I would gravitate more towards ChatGPT than I would do Copilot. But every time I log into my Office, my Microsoft 365 nowadays, that's all I'm presented with, choice or no. I get the impression there's a lot of businesses that didn't actually want that choice. But yeah, so
No.
how do you start to unpick that scenario? Because there'll be loads of people with that.
Yeah, well, firstly, Microsoft, what are you doing? I logged into portal.office.com for 10 years happily, and now you've taken that away and replaced it with Copilot. I don't want to chat with Copilot. I want to open Outlook or Teams.
I just want to get to Word.
I just want to start doing some work. I don't want to have like 5 suggested prompts that are meaningless to me. Look, my view on that is that Microsoft are having to shove Copilot in people's faces because they're not getting the market share that they anticipated. And I did a poll recently on LinkedIn that had 150 people respond. You might even been one of them. And ChatGPT was the tool of preference for over 60% of the respondents. And in terms of the Copilot stats, the Copilot was only the preference for 17% of respondents. Now, bear in mind, before I launched the AI services company, I've been a Microsoft 365 solutions architect for the past 7 years. So I've got a lot of Microsoft 365 people in my network. I was shocked, like genuinely shocked to find that out.
So you make a really valid point there, Matt. I mean, on one of our early episodes with Kevin from a company called Allhuman, he really drove home the point that AI is just being shoved into every single product, sort of square peg, round hole. And I know we've just sort of like, uncovered a little bit of the pet peeves that we have, I guess, with Copilot there. But arguably, the same thing could be said for, Gemini with companies that are using Google Workspace. So they're not the only culprit in doing that. I guess from a business perspective, like how do you start to find that balance? You've got your workforce saying we want to use this, but you've got your technology providers saying use that. And I'm not an expert like yourself, but I wouldn't appreciate the finite differences between the two. What's better, what isn't? So how do you start to unpack that?
Yeah, really, really good question. So it all comes down to use case for tools, right? So AI is just another tool to me, a bit like a creative person might use Adobe Photoshop or Canva, for example. Like they're 2 different tools for 2 different types of creatives, and AI is no different. If people have a strong preference to using ChatGPT, my recommendation to most businesses is that rather than fight against them, run with them and provide them with a team or an enterprise subscription. Most people don't realize ChatGPT brought out the team edition a few months ago, and that actually by default prevents the model from training on the data that you input and also the data that is output. So it is a compliant solution for businesses. You're not leaking IP if you're using ChatGPT Team or Enterprise Edition. If you go one further and then do go up to Enterprise Edition, then you actually get hosted on dedicated hardware at OpenAI that is SOC 2 compliant. So that's like the equivalent of our ISO 27001. So there's a lot of people that go, we can't use ChatGPT because the governance isn't strong enough. Well, if they're SOC 2 compliant and they're on dedicated hardware for customers that are in the enterprise, why not? There are some financial institutions, I can't remember who off the top of my head, but there are some financial institutions and the logos on OpenAI's website using that today. So Can't be that non-compliant.
I didn't know that about ChatGPT.
Ah, there you go.
I did not know that, because as soon as you said that, I was like, well, first question, why would anybody start to build their own internal LLMs then?
Oh, well, yeah, I do. So I see if you have a genuine need, for example. So I'll back this up a little bit further. I can't remember the full name of it, but the Cloud Act that you may or may not be familiar with, where effectively, if you're hosted by an American company, you can get subpoenaed, and doesn't matter where it is in the world. The data center could be in Europe, but if it's a Microsoft data center, Satya can go in, plug his USB stick in, and go, "Thank you very much. I'll have all of that to comply with the subpoena." And you don't even know it's happened, because it might not even be related to you, but your data might get washed up out of that. That's what people are afraid of mostly, right? And for companies that are dealing in really, really sensitive information, so stuff to do with government, top secret information, anyone that's in the defense industry, for example, I can see why they would want to train and have their own models hosted on dedicated hardware. Just going back to that stuff I was talking about with the Lenovo talks, that actually got me thinking a lot more about how many people are going to bring back their hosting onto on-prem. I ran some numbers through. The size of on-premise infrastructure at the moment as a market globally is about 120 billion. It's going to rise to a projected 700 billion by 2030. That's just in on-prem data center infra, which is crazy.
I think ultimately, AI, it's the hot topic, but I remember sort of the same style of conversations a few years ago when we were talking about, give you an example of customer identity. Okay, so I think when that Cloud Act, because I think it spawned originally from like the Patriot Act, isn't it? And then
that's right, yes,
like that Cloud Act, yeah. And everybody was like, yes, but customer data has to be here. We have to have self-sovereign identity. It must be in the four walls of the UK. It's like that.
Yeah.
That was about 2 years ago, when that conversation has never really been brought up again. It just so happens to kind of what you said there. It's the same conversation. It's the different technology. And maybe eventually people start to do that, but I don't know. Do you start to think like, well, if ChatGPT is doing this, does that link to your Gemini? Does that link to Copilot? Are they providing sort of the same levels of security, or what? Let's start thinking about those differences there.
Yeah, so Gemini is a bit of a more of an unknown to me. I don't do a whole lot with it. Weirdly, my dad knows Gemini better than I do, and he's 68, right? Sorry, I've taken us down a little rabbit hole here, but just let that sink in. He is 68 years old, and his default search engine or default search tool is now Gemini on his phone. Like, for anybody that's watching this thinking, I don't know about this AI stuff, I'm kind of against it, really. Just think about that. 68 years old, nearly 70-year-old man, painter decorator, doesn't work in tech, never worked in tech, held tools and worked a manual job all his life. Like, just it absolutely blows my mind. But in terms of like the different vendors and the different levels of compliance, the thing that Microsoft have had over people for a while is that each Microsoft 365 Copilot instance is hosted within your Graph API and within your tenant. So data is apparently guaranteed to never leave your tenant boundary. How true that is, no one yet knows, because it's never been tested. But why would Microsoft come out and say that if it were untrue? So, I don't know exactly how it works in the background. Only people at Microsoft on the product team will really truly know that. But I can't imagine that every single tenant has their own Copilot infrastructure. There's going to have to be an element of multi-tenancy spread among Microsoft 365 tenants, right? So it's, whilst it is dedicated, how dedicated it is, I don't know. But right now they are the leader in a compliant solution.
Yeah.
Or that's certainly the perception of the market.
Yeah. So whenever I think of that, I go back to that example, Meta, so Facebook, and I think the Irish government, it was a GDPR fine, if I remember correct. 1 or 2 years ago, because pictures were being stored in a US data center of EU citizens, and they went to town on them in terms of the value. I can't remember the exact amount, but it was a big fine. Chump change, was it? Yeah, it was a decent fine.
I want to say it was like 500 million or something.
Yeah,
I remember it at the time and thinking, "Ouch, that's gonna."
Yeah, kind of an example of situation, wasn't it? Yeah, but let's bring it back to that example of Paul earlier. So you highlighted a really profound point there in the fact that, workers want to use the tools they want to use. Businesses, are being, whether they want it or not, kind of put in their faces these AI platforms from existing vendors. You would like to assume that the tools that users want to go and use. So, I mean, I was messing around the other day with a solution called Gamma AI. I think a website called Gamma AI. It does like dynamic presentations and things like that. You'd like to assume that they're using GPT backend and have that same infrastructure security, but that probably isn't always going to be the case, for one. And for two, coming back to the shadow AI area as well,
Hmm.
while kind of encouraging shadow AI. So, how do you get those users adopting it in a safe way?
Yeah, really good question, James. Thank you.
All right.
So, two ways you can go as a business. Route one is the soft route, and you can bring out a acceptable AI usage policy, and you can have a list of tools that you will accept the use of, and then everything else is prohibited. And then you set the guardrails, i.e., you mustn't input corporate data, you must do this, you must do that, you must use these settings, i.e., turn memory off, make sure that you aren't improving having the model settings on to improve the model, which means your data's being used to train the next version of ChatGPT or whatever LLM it is that you're using. So that's one way that you can do it. And obviously that requires you to communicate that and then educate and train the users on that policy. What I'm suggesting to most businesses that are sort of, I would say, mid-tier plus is to actually put a compliance and security tool in place so that you can monitor, evaluate, and proactively prevent some of the usages of these tools that you are not approving in your business. So let's just say you're the business owner. You've done all the right things. You've provided a ChatGPT Enterprise subscription for everybody who wants to use AI, and everybody who doesn't want to use it wasn't interested, so you didn't give them one. You've still got a handful of disgruntled employees that freaking love Gemini, right? They've got everything set up there. They want to use it, and that's all they want to do. And so they just keep on using it. And you know it's happening, but you can't prove it. The only way you can actually go and do anything about that is with a third-party tool. Now, I used a really glaring red flag option there as a use case. There are other way more subtle use cases, like you mentioned about your deck building AI, or for example, Runway, which is a video production tool, ChatGPT's Sora. These are all separate and individual tools that have separate logins and separate systems and separate settings, crucially, for all of your prompts and everything. So what people need is a tool that can identify, first and foremost, where is all of this stuff going? Who is using what on my corporate devices or with my corporate identities? Step number one. Step number two, once you've got that landscape of data, is to go and then run all of the education sessions with those users to say, look, we know you're doing this. Here is all the evidence that you're doing this. Please stop. This is serious. We need you to use this tool, this tool, this tool, and this tool. If there isn't a tool in the suite, here is the request process to get a license. And don't do that thing that we've always done before in security teams where we go no by default. It should be yes by default, no by exception. Because we need to be curious. We need to be exploring these tools and not putting up blockers. The minute we put up blockers, people find ways around them. There are plenty of them. So that's the second thing. The third thing is to actually then enforce those policies that you've put in place via a policy-driven engine, a little bit like conditional access. And James, we mentioned before, I should say, very quick shameless plug. We do actually sell a solution with an American vendor, with the only UK, in fact, only EU reseller at this time that does all of that for you. So that's the best way to guarantee that you are not leaking data out into AI tools. And sorry, I've held the wooden spoon for ages. Back over to you.
No, that's fine. And I'm really happy you said that users will find ways to circumvent it, because I'm trying to think about practically now how that would work. Because are you going to track those users in terms of through the activity through the browser, for example? Identities would be the ideal way, but let's be honest, identities, there are plenty of, buried bodies. Lots of it is broken. Lots of it is legacy. That's why so many companies at the moment are trying to modernize that. So how does that actually apply in the real world?
Yeah. So if we think about all the signals that we can take from all the different places, right? So you've got, for most businesses, you've got your SIEM solution, you've got your EDR, you've got your XDR, you've got your identity solution, you've got your DNS. You've also got a web browser plugin. We connect to all of those different data sources, aggregate them, and then pull them together to give you a complete picture of what people are doing. Because it's only if you take all of those sources in and ingest them and go through them and sift through them that you can actually figure out what's going on. And by doing that, and by taking all of those sources and aggregating, we can even detect if someone's set up something like Olama on their own personal device and they're using local LLM tech as well to try and get around being, oh, well, if I'm not on the cloud and I'm running it locally on my PC, they'll never find me. Ha ha ha. No, that's not the case. We can take signals from lots of places. There's plenty of them now with all the different solutions we've got and all the different security measures people have been beefing themselves up with over the last few years.
I didn't expect such a comprehensive answer, to be honest.
Sorry, I kind of ruined it there.
Yeah, I know. Firmly taking back the wooden spoon on that answer. Fantastic. So I guess then in terms of what you have seen out in the wild and people adopting case, so we know that obviously users are adopting it. You've just quite nicely laid out a way for companies to allow that flexibility with, safeguards in place for AI adoption. And in terms of what have you actually seen in the workforce? Because I'm thinking back to all these examples we've gone over. We've got AI adoption, I guess, from company driven, end user driven, or departmental driven. So I'll use that Gamma, for example, which is, a presentation tool. Somebody might go and use Google's new one in the marketing team to create some nice, cool videos. I've forgotten what it's called now. VO3, is it something?
VO, I think it's VO, something like that.
I've never actually tried to pronounce it out loud. So pat on the back for me for that one. So what kind of adoption rates have you seen? Because I'd imagine there's multiple happening at the same time.
Yeah, great question. So what I'm seeing is a couple of different things. On the one side, I'm seeing businesses go, we're going to rule with an iron fist. We're banning ChatGPT. We're banning everything that's not Copilot. If it's not Copilot, it doesn't exist and we don't care. You're using Copilot. I don't think that's the right way to go. I think you need to give users the flexibility to use the tools they want to use. If you try and force a developer to use a particular IDE, for example, and they don't like it, they're just not, they're going to complain until you eventually cave. Same thing will happen with AI. On the other side of the fence, what we're seeing is the complete polar opposite, which blows my mind, is user-led adoption. So let's just say, for example, you have a team of salespeople or marketing people beneath you. You find this Gamma tool and you go, this is good. This is saving me hours. I know it's going to save the team hours. I've got budget. Let's go. You just go and buy it. You buy it on your company credit card. You buy the subscription. You buy 5 licenses. You give it to the team. You go, there you go. And then you go and tell IT, oh, by the way, we signed up to this AI tool this week and we're doing that. And then they end up going like this. And genuinely, it's happening all the time. Users are leading the adoption and it's the tail wagging the dog. And neither is the right way of doing it. The best way to go forward, in my mind, is to take a sensible approach where the business leads the adoption, but gathers all of the user requirements, gathers all of the feedback, uses a business analyst, even if it's just for a short term, for a few sprints, to gather from each team and each department what it is they need AI to do for them, and then start implementing those solutions in a way that works for both parties. So if the marketing department want to use ChatGPT because it's great at generating image content with 4.0, they get access to Sora to do some video clips, let them have it. Give them a team subscription, give them the guardrails to do it. If the sales team want to use Copilot because it's much better at digging through all of those documents that they've already created, all those proposals, all of those pitch decks, and then taking and lifting those words and putting them into emails, for example, give them Copilot. But give people the right tools and make it a requirement-led exercise rather than just willy-nilly like shotgun blasting off and letting people do what they want, or even worse, trying to just mandate one tool and that's all we're going to use, because it's just never going to work. It's like saying, let's go and build a massive, great big 300 column table in Microsoft Word when you've got Excel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. Where my head's going on this is who, I guess, who has to own that? Because you could have, as you said, the business owns that adoption. They go do that assessment, they create the resource and put the analyst on it. I can see somebody from, a director of IT, for example, or just the IT department kind
Mm.
of owning that because you are trying to give enablement tools to improve efficiency, improve, productivity, profit, etc. But there's equally an argument to be said that this should be a security or a cybersecurity driven initiative. It's we know you're doing this. We want to get ahead of it.
Mm.
It's an opportunity to demonstrate that you're not the no department, but
The no department.
that doesn't exactly seem like a small task. It arguably seems you might need a full-time person in the seat managing that because this changes every 6 months, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, quite. Let me ask you another question. Where does the AI budget come from?
Ooh.
I don't have an answer.
No.
Every business is doing it differently, but most businesses are pointing it at IT. Whose budgets are currently the most constricted due to massive cybersecurity spend? IT.
Yeah.
So, so this is just my take on it, right? And I'm not an AI deity. I've just been doing it a little bit longer than everybody else, right? So I'm a little bit further ahead. In my mind, it's a business problem to solve. IT is an enabler. So in terms of how you roll this out, there needs to be a team that's dedicated to provisioning AI within the business. Depending on how big your business is, that might either be some internal people, it could be some external consultants, it could be a fusion of the two. You could outsource the entire thing to, IBM, KPMG, one of the big four, whatever. But that's going to be horrifically expensive if you do that. I don't advocate for that. Of course, I don't. Come and speak to me. But at the end of the day, it's not an IT initiative. It's not a cybersecurity initiative. It is tooling. You don't get, I'm going to go back to my graphics department example. You don't get the graphics department going and asking IT if they can have Photoshop or Canva. They just say, we're having Photoshop. We've renewed our contract. You need to install it on these 5 devices. So because of the whole data issue and compliance issue around it, it's more complicated and nuanced, but there needs to be a team that works together on this stuff. It can't just be owned by IT. It can't just be owned by security. They're key stakeholders in a wider AI program. I think one of the things that we're going to see evolving rapidly in the next 12 to 18 months is the role of chief AI officer. That's something that I deliver fractionally as a service for people if they want to work just with me and not with my business. And it's going to be that person's responsibility to manage the stakeholders and manage the business expectation and actually drive the overall AI roadmap forward.
You mentioned the chief AI officer because I'm thinking about the different stakeholders who owns it. And let's be honest, when it comes to cybersecurity, most changes that happen within the security posture of a company are driven by regulations, are driven by compliance, etc. And I know we could probably do an entire episode on it, so let's not dive too heavy into it. But obviously, we've got the EU AI Act coming out, and that chief AI officer is going to have to ensure that they comply to that in such a safe way. So, I guess as that starts to evolve, and perhaps there are some businesses out there that are trying to create that position, you're working in the cybersec team now. You can't put yourself on this full time, but you know it's a problem and you know it's going to come back to hit you at some point, or at least it increases the probability of an event that you have to, resolve. Practically, what could you go and do in a business to kind of get this conversation moving, start the business on the right path?
Okay, I'm going to throw a slight curveball and then I'm going to fully answer the question. The first thing you should be doing as any business is coming out with an AI usage statement. This is something that I've coined myself, and saying to your employees, we're deploying AI, we're deploying LLM tech, we're deploying agents, and we're exploring how to use AI more and more in our business to drive more revenue. We're not going to replace you. We want to help you. We want to give you more tools. We want to make you more and more productive. And we want to increase our revenue by X% through the use of AI. We do not want to cut costs. We do not want to cut humans. We are committed to protecting human jobs. That's the very, very first thing that any business needs to do. And I should have probably started the podcast with that. But now that that's out of the way, the next thing that you need to do is start piloting things. Figure out where, actually, no, that's not the next thing you need to do. You need to figure out what the problem is. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? For example, do you have a sales team that are on the phone all day and way too busy to write up their notes? You need an AI note taker, for example, or Teams Premium. Do you have a marketing department that just cannot keep up with content? Well, they need ChatGPT. Do you have a drowning customer support team that cannot get through queries quickly enough because they just don't have the bandwidth? You need an AI triage agent sat there assigning people tickets and moving things around and potentially even automatically responding to people in the first instance. So first thing is to figure out what problem you're trying to solve. The next thing is to put in a system to pilot solving it, wrap some KPIs around that and monitor them really, really closely, and then figure out, did the pilot solve the problem, yes or no? Did it achieve return on investment, yes or no? If it did both of those things, roll it out and then just tackle it problem by problem, system by system, department by department. And eventually, once you've done that enough times, you will have a portfolio full of artificial intelligence wrapped around all of your business, which is hopefully, because you've tackled it one problem at a time, compliant, efficient, and hits all of your return on investment criteria.
Matt, thank you very much for being on today's episode. It's been a pleasure having you. If any of our listeners want to reach out to you, pick your head on AI or what they could do, because it's definitely a problem that's happening in their environment, whether they're aware of it or not. What's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, the best way to reach out to me, James, is to either connect with me on LinkedIn. So that's in/Neal AI Pro, or send me an email. That's matt.neal@artificia1. That's artificial, just with a 1 at the end, .com. Either of those are good. If you ping me either of those channels, I can set up a call with you. No problem. Always happy to chat to people.
Thank you for being on today's episode.
No, thank you so much for hosting me, James. Really, really appreciate it. And hopefully we get to do this again sometime soon.
Definitely, mate. All the best.